The sun was setting as I sat in my beat-up Civic watching families pour out of the stadium, their laughter filling the air like confetti. My name had just been called. Camila Elaine Reed, Master of Data Analytics. The crowd erupted in cheers, but I didn't hear any of it. Not a single familiar face in the crowd. The reserved for family section sat empty. A cruel reminder of the people who should have been there. As the photographers snapped pictures of me holding my diploma, I smiled, holding my breath as my cheeks burned. I wasn't fooling anyone, not even myself. The emptiness was deafening, and it would only get worse. But what happened next? Well, that's a story that changed everything. Have you ever felt invisible? Completely alone even when surrounded by hundreds of people? Drop a yes in the comments if you know what I mean. Stay tuned, because this story takes a twist no one saw coming. Camila Elaine Reed. That's who I am now. At least, that's who the world sees. But underneath this degree, this diploma that feels like it was earned in the shadow of everything I've given up, is the girl who spent her childhood watching everyone else get the love, the attention, the praise, while she learned how to serve, sacrifice, and stay quiet. I was raised in a home where love was measured by how much you could give, by how much you could sacrifice without asking for anything in return. From a young age, I was taught to work hard, to serve others, to be the steady hand everyone could rely on. It was a life built on expectation and obligation. No one ever asked what I wanted, what I needed. It was always about them. It was always about Avery, my younger sister, about her school activities, her piano lessons, her Sweet 16. And me, well, I was the one who worked at Starbucks at 16, who sent money home every paycheck, who said yes to every request no matter how draining it was. They never said thank you in the way that mattered. They said thank you like it was part of the transaction, like it was an obligation. And I believed it. I believed that love sounded like appreciation. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was never seen, not for who I was, not for the person I wanted to be. I was just a tool, an ATM on legs, and as I walked across that stage in my cap and gown, I realized that all the achievements in the world couldn't make them see me, not for who I was, not for all I'd sacrificed. For the first time in my life, I realized that success wouldn't change that. It didn't matter how hard I worked, how many degrees I collected, or how much I proved myself. They would always look at me the same way, like I was just a stepping stone in their lives. And then came the text. A simple demand that shattered everything. Need $200 for your sister's Sweet 16. No congratulations, no recognition of my achievement, just a request, a demand. And that was the moment it happened. Something in me snapped. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to just say yes. I wasn't going to just take it. I was going to make them see me. I was going to take control of my life. But I had no idea just how far things would go. What would you do if your family treated you like you were nothing more than a tool? Think about it. How far would you go to finally stand up for yourself? Would you have done the same thing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Growing up, my life was a constant balancing act. From dawn till dusk, I juggled school, work, and trying to keep the peace at home. Mom's voice echoed in my head every time I clocked into my shift at Starbucks. Avery needs piano lessons, she'd text. She has a field trip. I remember the first time she said, "You're our pride." It felt like warmth, like validation, like maybe, just maybe, I was doing something right. But I was always second to Avery. It was never malicious, never outright. But when you're a kid, you notice the absence of things, the absence of praise, the absence of a hug after a long day, the absence of any acknowledgement of what you were doing and how hard you were trying. Avery always had the spotlight, and I was content to stay in its shadows, silently supporting. My mom had a way of making it sound like it was my duty, my job. It was never about me, about my dreams or desires. It was always about what they needed, what she needed. I remember feeling proud when I got into grad school. Finally, something of my own. This was it, the moment everything would change. This degree will make everything better, I thought. I worked 2 jobs, studied late into the night, and sacrificed my social life, all of it to prove I was worth something. To prove that if I succeeded, I could be more than the paycheck. I could be her equal. But in the end, it was the same. The same empty seat at my graduation. The same silence after the ceremony. The same text message asking for money. Mom never called to congratulate me. She didn't even ask how the day went. No. What I got was a demand for $2,100 for Avery's Sweet 16. It wasn't even a request. It was a demand wrapped in the familiar language of obligation. 3 days after the ceremony, still in my cap and gown, still processing the emptiness of the day, I stared at the screen. Need $200 for your sister's Sweet 16. My finger hovered over the reply. For years, I'd given and never asked for anything in return. But now, something had changed. I couldn't do it anymore. I sat there in my apartment, the same place I'd lived for years, the same place I'd worked so hard to keep steady. And suddenly, all those years of being a dutiful daughter felt like they'd been wasted. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a person with hopes or dreams. I was a tool, a means to an end. I knew what I had to do. I knew I couldn't let this cycle repeat. I couldn't let my mom use me anymore. I opened my bank app, saw the $3,000 in savings, the only thing that was truly mine. I stared at the number, then typed in 1. I added the message, "Congrats," and then I sent it. The moment I hit send, something inside me hardened. I realized this was it. The line had been crossed, and I wasn't going to go back. I wasn't the backup plan anymore. I wasn't the one who always said yes. I was finally saying no. Then came the lock. Have you ever felt like you gave everything only to be used? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have sent the money, or would you have stood your ground? Let me know in the comments below. The days after that moment felt strange, quiet, almost too quiet. I'd spent so much of my life being the one who showed up, the one who carried the load, that when I finally let go, it was as if the world itself paused, holding its breath. I didn't know how to exist without the constant demand, without the familiar chaos of their expectations hanging over me. But it didn't last. It never does. A few days later, when I was just starting to settle into the silence of my apartment, the doorbell rang. I froze. It wasn't Mrs. Patel, my landlord. It wasn't anyone who'd usually come by. I walked to the door, checked the peephole, and saw 2 officers standing outside. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know why they were here, but I knew it wasn't good. "Miss Reed?" the taller officer asked as he flashed his badge. His voice was calm, professional. I nodded, barely able to speak. "Yes. We received a call from your mother. She's concerned about your well-being. She says you've been acting erratically, changing locks, not answering calls. She's worried you might harm yourself." I didn't laugh. I should have. The absurdity of it all was enough to make anyone crack. But I didn't. Instead, I just stared at him. It was all so predictable. The manipulation, the control. They were trying to make me the problem. She was trying to make me unstable so I'd be the one who looked crazy. It was her classic move. I stood there, not knowing whether to scream or cry. My mom had gone this far before, using guilt, using anything she could to make me the villain in her narrative. And now, she was using the police. The officers were polite, asked me a few questions. I explained that I had just finished grad school, that I was working on applications, that everything was fine. I told them it was just boundaries, not instability. They'll file the report as no concern, the officer said. But if your mother calls again, you can reference this visit. When they left, I stood in the doorway, breathing in the cool air that had replaced the tension inside my apartment. My heart was still racing. I felt sick to my stomach. My mother had crossed a line, and I had no idea how far she would go next. But there was no turning back now. The next morning, I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee, trying to ground myself. The silence, once peaceful, now felt oppressive. I had changed the locks, made it clear where I stood, and yet my mother wasn't done. It had been a few days since the police showed up, and everything was calm. Too calm. And then it hit me. The credit inquiries. I opened my banking app and saw two unfamiliar names, Capital One and Discover, both recent inquiries, both linked to my name. My stomach twisted. I clicked through to my credit report, and there it was, 2 accounts opened under my name at my parents' address. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just manipulation anymore, this was fraud. I sat there staring at the screen, the weight of it sinking in. I had trusted her. For years, I had trusted her to be a mother, to love me, to see me. And now, she'd gone as far as stealing my identity, using my name to rack up thousands of dollars in debt. This wasn't just betrayal. This was an attack on everything I had worked for. But it wasn't the first time she had crossed a line. It was just the first time I could see it clearly. Have you ever had someone close to you betray your trust in such a way? How far would you go to protect yourself when the ones you love turn on you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it.
I couldn't breathe. Not from panic, but from the weight of the betrayal that hit me like a freight train. My hand shook as I stared at the credit report. My mother. She had opened 2 credit accounts in my name. She had forged my signature and used my identity. My mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The Sweet 16 money, the piano lessons, the endless requests. It was never about love. It had always been about control, about her own needs. She used me, used my hard work, my sacrifices as a stepping stone for her own gain. The phone call to the bank was a blur. I dialed, my voice trembling but steady. "This is Camilla Reed. I need to report identity theft." The woman on the other end confirmed the worst. "We have 2 accounts opened in your name, but under the address of your parents, Capital One and Discover. The co-signer listed is Linda M. Reed." My mother. She had become me. She had used my name to run up thousands of dollars in debt. I thought I might be sick. My mother wasn't just using me anymore. She had taken my identity, my life, and made it her own. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. I felt the room close in around me, the weight of the betrayal suffocating. But then something else stirred within me, something that had been buried deep for so long. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was anger, raw and unfiltered. I had spent my entire life bending over backwards for my family, trying to earn their love, their recognition, their approval. But now I saw the truth. They never saw me, not truly. I had been nothing but a means to an end, a convenient tool for them to use when they needed something. And now, I was done. I opened the voice recorder on my phone. In Colorado, one-party consent meant I could record the call without her knowing. The game had changed. The rules were mine now. I dialed her number. She picked up after 3 rings, her voice sharp, like she knew something was wrong. "So you're alive," she said, her tone cold, clipped. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice even, "I found 2 credit cards under my name, both using your address. Do you want to explain that?" She laughed, but it wasn't real. It was hollow. "Oh, that? I was helping you. You need credit history. I was doing this for you." Doing this for me? I could feel the rage rising in my chest. "You forged my signature," I said quietly. "Oh, stop dramatizing. It's family. You should be grateful. You've always been so ungrateful." I let out a sharp laugh, the kind that comes when you realize how utterly absurd it all is. "You mean me? I paid for everything. I worked 2 jobs, took on loans. You used my college fund for Avery's prom dress." Her voice faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. "You agreed to help." "No," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I didn't agree to this. I didn't agree to you stealing from me." Then came the bombshell. The thing that would change everything. "I reported the fraud," I said, each word cutting through the tension. "The bank knows. The accounts are frozen. You'll be hearing from them." There was a long silence on the other end. For the first time, she didn't have a response. I could hear her breathing, shallow and quick. The sound of her panic. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered, her voice trembling. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle over me. I had already done it. I ended the call, saving the recording. Boundaries, May 17th, 2025. I sat there for a moment, staring at my phone, my chest tight with a mix of anger and satisfaction. I had done it. I had finally fought back. I had drawn the line. But the fight was far from over. What would you do if you found out your own mother had used you like this? How would you handle it?
The days following that phone call felt like a blur. I hadn't heard from my mother, but I knew the silence wasn't peace. It was strategy. She was plotting her next move. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I was done being the pawn in her game. I had taken control, and now I would protect what was mine. I sat at my desk, the police report from the night the officers came still fresh in my inbox. Every corner of my apartment now felt like it belonged to me. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was mine. I had created it. I had built boundaries for the first time in my life, and that was a power I hadn't realized I had. But then came the next blow. My phone buzzed one evening as I sat on my couch, sipping tea. The message that appeared on my screen was from Avery, my sister, the golden child, the one who had always gotten what she wanted, without question. "Are you insane?" the text read. "The police just showed up. The DJ stopped. Everyone's staring. Mom's freaking out." I stared at the message for a long time. My heart twisted, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. The years of manipulation, the constant neediness, the guilt trips, they had all led to this. Avery was upset, sure, but she wasn't the one who had been used. She wasn't the one who had watched as their mother used her name to steal what was mine. The text continued. "They're saying her name. The bank guy said your name. What did you do?" I didn't reply, not because I didn't want to, because I didn't need to. They would all find out soon enough. The truth would come crashing down on them. The next day I saw the news. A half-hour clip had been uploaded to social media. My mother's Sweet 16 was now infamous. The scene at Cherry Creek events, the police showing up to verify the fraud, the guests whispering and taking pictures, it had gone viral. My mother, the woman who had always held the reins of control, had been exposed. The comment section was full of judgment and pity. People I didn't even know were sharing their outrage, and for the first time, I felt like justice had been done. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth. The truth had been uncovered. But there was more to come. Later that night, I got a call. It was from Capital One's fraud department. My heart stopped when I heard the voice on the other end. "Miss Reed, this is Lauren Stein, legal representative for Capital One. I'm calling to inform you that we've escalated your fraud report. Our internal team has coordinated with local law enforcement to verify transactions tonight at Cherry Creek events. You're not required to attend, but we wanted to notify you of the progress." I hung up, feeling a strange satisfaction. This was it, the final unraveling, the moment where everything they'd done to me would be paid back. But I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. For the first time in years, I felt free. The storm inside me had finally passed, and the silence that followed was no longer an echo of loneliness. It was the sound of me taking back my life. The next morning, I woke to another text from Avery. "Why did you do this? Why are you ruining everything?" I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Everything? Everything was already ruined. She just hadn't seen it yet. They hadn't seen me yet. But I was done explaining, done apologizing. The fight had gone on long enough, and I was finally at peace with it. The silence in my apartment felt powerful now. It wasn't the quiet before the storm anymore. It was the storm, and I was finally the one holding the thunder.
The quiet had settled into something stronger, something more solid than I could have ever imagined. For so long, I had let myself be manipulated, pushed into corners, until my entire existence had been defined by the people around me. I had been the good daughter, the hardworking sibling, the dutiful one. But now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't playing by their rules. I could finally breathe. And that's when I realized I wasn't just protecting my space. I was protecting myself, my identity, everything I had built for myself. But as much as the silence felt empowering, there was still one thing I needed to do, one final act that would close this chapter once and for all. I needed to make sure that they understood what they had done, that they realized the consequences of using me as their personal ATM, their backup plan, their doormat. They had crossed lines, used my name for their gain, and tried to paint me as the villain when I finally set a boundary. I had spent my whole life trying to earn their love, trying to prove I was worthy of their recognition, but no more. It was time for me to stop giving, to stop sacrificing, and to stop apologizing for taking control. So I began to plan. I wasn't going to fight fire with fire. I wasn't going to stoop to their level. But I was going to make sure that they faced the consequences of their actions. And it wasn't about revenge for me. It was about taking back what was mine. It was about finally being seen, not as the daughter they could use, but as the woman I had become. I opened my laptop and started searching. I dug through bank statements, credit reports, legal advice. I knew what I needed to do. My mother had stolen my identity, used my credit, and tried to paint me as unstable. But I wasn't going to let her win. I called my lawyer to start the process of filing for fraud. I gathered evidence, screenshots, statements, documents, and built my case like a fortress. Everything had been leading to this moment. Everything had been leading to this one act of retribution, making sure that they couldn't hurt me anymore. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the credit cards or the Sweet 16. It was about the years of emotional manipulation, of being used and discarded like I didn't matter. It was about standing up and saying, I matter. I am not invisible. I will not be taken for granted anymore. And that's when I realized something that I had never let myself see before. The real revenge wasn't in the punishment. It was in the boundary. It was in finally saying no.
Before I go on, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary like that? Ever felt like you were pushed to the edge and had to fight for your peace? Drop a yes in the comments if you've been there, and tell me how you handled it. Your story might just inspire someone else going through something similar. Now, let's keep going. Trust me, it gets even more intense from here. The day had come. After weeks of planning, of gathering evidence, of preparing myself for the final confrontation, Everything was in motion. I had filed the fraud report. I had taken the steps to protect my credit. But now it was time for the world to see who my mother really was. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. I'd already taken control of my life, set the boundaries, and built the walls I needed to protect myself. But there was one last thing I had to do, one last action that would make everything final. The phone rang late that afternoon. I knew it was coming, but that didn't stop my heart from racing as I picked up the call. Ms. Reed, this is Lauren Stein, legal representative for Capital One in Colorado. I'm calling to inform you that your fraud report has been escalated. We have coordinated with local law enforcement to verify the transactions made tonight at Cherry Creek events. You're not required to attend, but we wanted to inform you of the progress. I sat there, my hand tightening around the phone, knowing that everything I had done, every step I had taken, had led to this moment. This wasn't about getting back at my mother. This was about ensuring that the truth was finally seen. I wasn't the crazy one. I wasn't the villain. She was, and the world was about to know it. As the evening wore on, I watched the events unfold from my quiet apartment. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. I knew how it would end. I had already won. By 8:45 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from Avery. "Are you insane? The police just showed up. The DJ stopped. Everyone's staring. Mom's freaking out." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. By the time the police arrived at Cherry Creek, everything was set in motion. The officers, calm and collected, walked into the event alongside a representative from the bank. They didn't need sirens or chaos. They didn't need any drama. The truth was loud enough on its own. The officer addressed the crowd. "We're here to verify a report of credit card fraud linked to this event. The charges were made using an account under the name Camilla Reed." The air in the room shifted. Gasps echoed from the guests. Cameras were lifted, whispers spread like wildfire. My mother stood frozen, the color draining from her face. She tried to deny it. Of course, she always did. The officer continued reading aloud. "Primary applicant, Linda M. Reed. Co-signer unauthorized. Transactions made using another person's identity." Avery's voice cut through the tension, her whisper barely audible, but still cutting through the crowd. "Mom, what did you do?" And my mother? She couldn't speak. She didn't have the words. She was caught. Exposed. The lies she had lived behind for years were crumbling around her. The officer remained neutral, professional. "This is just documentation for the bank's case, but we'll need to take copies of the receipts and verification." In that moment, the music stopped. The celebration that had been about Avery's Sweet 16 crumbled. The DJ unplugged his equipment. The guests began to trickle out, some embarrassed, some uncomfortable. The banner that read "Avery's Sweet 16, Born to Shine" sagged under the weight of reality. The room that had once been filled with joy was now filled with confusion and shame. By the time my mother stepped outside, the rain had begun to fall. The storm that had been brewing for years had finally come. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. But as I sat in my apartment watching the storm roll through Denver, I knew it was over. My mother would never be able to use me again. The storm didn't end the night of the Sweet 16. If anything, that moment was only the thunderclap, the one that finally shook my family's carefully constructed image until the cracks showed. But the real aftermath? That came in the days that followed. 3 mornings after the event, I woke up to an email from Capital One. Short, clinical, but powerful enough to make my chest tighten. Fraud investigation resolved. Primary applicant, Linda M. Reed, has acknowledged unauthorized use and agreed to repay $8,412 in full. Just like that, the truth was on paper. No more denial, no more twisting the story to make me the villain, no more pretending everything was just a misunderstanding. Her signature stood there, proof that she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Word traveled fast in Littleton. Suburbs have a way of spreading gossip faster than wildfire. The Reeds, the family who always dressed well for church, who smiled too widely at barbecues, who bragged about Avery's dance competitions, were suddenly the center of murmurs in grocery aisles and side glances in parking lots. People whispered, "Did you hear what happened at their Sweet 16? Is it true she used her daughter's credit? Why would a mother do that?" Meanwhile, Avery's party footage, the moment the officers walked in, the moment the banker read out my name, circulated online. 30 seconds of chaos, 500,000 views before she locked her accounts. The image of her mother panicking in a purple-lit banquet hall was everywhere. I didn't repost it. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth carried itself. My father took a quiet hit too. He was reprimanded at work for letting their mail and financial statements go to his company address, something I didn't even know he'd done. Another layer of secrets I was never meant to see. I didn't feel guilty. Not this time. Not anymore. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one scrambling to fix anything. I wasn't the one smoothing over their mistakes or paying for their choices. I wasn't the one carrying the blame. I filled out the remaining FTC forms, froze my credit, and closed every account my mother had ever touched. It was tedious, exhausting work, but necessary. And every form, every click, every confirmation felt like another chain snapping off me. Then I printed out the final confirmation letter and pinned it on my wall, right beside my diploma and the locksmith's receipt. 3 documents, side by side. Proof of effort, proof of protection, proof of freedom. That night, I brewed tea, opened my window, and let the crisp Denver evening roll into my apartment. It no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a sanctuary. The silence wasn't painful anymore. It didn't sting. It soothed. It healed. For the first time in a long time, I looked around my small apartment and felt safe. Like every inch of this space finally belonged to me. Not a place my mother could intrude, not a place she could destabilize. 6 months passed. Autumn came, covering Denver in gold. I started a new job at Nova Data Labs, a place where people called me by my name, not by what I could give. A place where I had a desk, a badge, and a future. A place where I mattered not because of obligation, but because of merit. And on my living room wall, I hung 3 things: my degree, my new employee badge, the old lock I once replaced. Together, they told one simple story. I chose myself. If you've ever had to set a boundary just to breathe again, if you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up, if you've ever walked away from people you loved because they refused to see you, you're not alone. Looking back, I can't pinpoint the exact moment I began to change. It wasn't an instant decision nor a sudden realization. It was a gradual shift. Small at first, but it grew louder with every step I took away from my past and into my future. The truth is, change isn't something that happens overnight. It's a slow, steady process of saying no when you've always said yes, of drawing a line in the sand when you spent your life letting others cross it. For so long, I believed love had to be earned, that if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, maybe, just maybe, my parents would see me for who I was and not just for what I could give. But as I grew older, I realized something that hit harder than anything I'd ever learned. Love isn't about earning approval. It's about being seen for who you truly are. The truth was, I had been invisible. To my family, I was the backup plan, the one who worked behind the scenes, the one who didn't ask for anything because I was so used to giving everything. But in the silence after graduation, after changing the locks, and after everything I did to finally stand up for myself, I began to see something I had never allowed myself to see before. I was worthy of more than what I had been given. I was worthy of respect. I was worthy of love. Real love. Not the kind that comes with strings attached, not the kind that makes you feel like a servant or a tool. The day I changed the locks wasn't just about keeping my family out. It was about keeping myself in. It was about giving myself the space I needed to finally breathe, to exist without feeling like I was constantly being drained. The real transformation happened when I realized I didn't need anyone's approval to live the life I wanted. I didn't need to keep asking for permission to exist. I didn't need to keep sacrificing my own well-being just to make others happy. I deserved peace. And if you've ever felt like your worth is measured by how much you give or how much you sacrifice, know this: you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to chase love that isn't freely given. You don't have to keep pouring from an empty cup. Your value is not determined by others. If you're still finding your way, if you're still in the process of learning to set those boundaries, I want you to know that it's worth it. It's worth the discomfort. It's worth the pain. It's worth walking away from the people and situations that drain you, because on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. And that freedom, it's yours. All you have to do is take it. As I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened, on the way I've changed, on the choices I've made, I know one thing for sure. I chose to put myself first. And in doing that, I found my peace, my power, and the strength to move forward without looking back. If you've ever faced a moment where you had to choose yourself over the expectations of others, know that you're not alone. We've all been there. And no matter how hard it gets, there's always a way through. If you've been inspired by this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more stories about overcoming challenges, taking control of your life, and finally living on your own terms. Drop a comment if you've ever had to take a stand for yourself. What's your story? How did you find your strength? And remember, your voice matters. Your peace matters, and you are worth more than any sacrifice. Until next time, keep choosing yourself.